It was 2003. Cho was 18 years old and about to graduate from Westfield High. Cho's family was morbidly concerned about him, as he had just recently stopped receiving mental health services, as he didn't want them anymore. His parents were also concerned about what his college years would be like, as Cho insisted on getting into Virginia Tech. Keep in mind, Virginia Tech is a huge school, and Cho's parents didn't know how Cho would blend into such an intense and large place full of diversity and people on all walks of life. These concerns make sense when you think about the fact that, well, Cho had maybe spoken a few hundred words in his entire life at that point. Cho's parents really wanted him to go to a small, nearby university, where he could maybe have a more personalized education that fit his special accommodations better. However, Cho pressed on about wanting to go to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech doesn't require a written essay or an interview to get in. It's literally just based on your SAT scores and grades, which Cho had no issue with. In fact, it was one of the only things he actually was good at. So without really any struggle, Cho was accepted into Virginia Tech, which would prove to be a fatal mistake for the campus. Later that year, Cho started attending Virginia Tech as a business information technology major. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust this motherfucker with a fingernail clipper. I couldn't imagine having him make important business decisions on my business's behalf. Anyway, problems were already starting to arise. Cho had a roommate who was an avid alcoholic and was also a complete slob. I guess me and Cho wouldn't have gotten along if we were roommates then. Oh well. This caused him to request a room change, which he later received. He was moved in with some senior who was never really home, so I guess that was really sweet for Cho because he's so antisocial. According to Cho's parents, Cho was actually really respectful and never asked for money, and in fact, lived quite cheaply. He didn't really cause too many issues, in his freshman year anyway. He was known by the teachers to be a bit off, but hadn't really established himself to be the creep he later became. In Cho's sophomore year, he was convinced one morning that he had been bitten by a bunch of mice. When he visited a doctor later that day, it was found that a bunch of mites didn't actually attack him in his sleep at all, but he actually just had severe acne and was actually put on acne medication. Now, what medication exactly, I'm not sure. I can't figure out which one. However, the reason this is of note is because acne medication has possibly been linked to depression and suicidal thoughts. Considering this was in Cho's sophomore year and he committed the attack when he was 23, perhaps the medication might have helped deteriorate his already awful mental state. It's a stretch, sure, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring up. If anyone on acne medication wants to tell me in the comments section their experiences with it, that'd be very helpful to my research. During Cho's sophomore year, he began writing again, and in fact, would spend almost all of his free time writing alone. He never let his sister or family read any of his writings. Now, one could assume this was just because Cho was really shy and antisocial. However, after actually reading his scripts, I could say the reason is probably because his writing is horrible. Here's an excerpt from one of his plays. John. No, please sir, no. Casino official. Get out of here, kids, and don't come back. Brownstone. I am so sorry about those gangsters, sir. We'll beef up our security. Are you alright, sir? You won't get away with this, Brownstone. You old motherfucker. I'll leave 2 of his plays in the description as links if you want to suffer through them. Just be warned, they're pretty awful. In fact, I've actually read Twilight, and I enjoyed those books tremendously more than Cho's plays. Anyway, Cho's grades were starting to slip mainly because he took a few English and writing classes. Considering his handle on the English language is awful, it makes sense that he didn't do particularly well in these classes. In fact, his GPA fell to just under 2.32. If his writing assignments were as awful as his plays, I could definitely understand as to why his grades were slipping. On top of being diagnosed with severe acne and getting awful grades, Cho had sent a book outline to a publisher only to find it was rejected. Around this time, Cho started to build a reputation among his classmates as a creepy fucking weirdo. Usually I'm pretty empathetic to most of these shooters, as they usually were treated quite unfairly, but Cho definitely earned his reputation. One time in class, Cho was invited to come back to this girl's room. Not for sex or romantic purposes, but for studying reasons. In this girl's room, randomly without any reason whatsoever, Cho pulled out a knife and started stabbing her carpet. Those same people who tried being nice to him once also invited him out to eat quite a bit, but he never would talk and would just stare at them awkwardly as he ate, so they stopped inviting him to do stuff. I'm surprised they invited him to do anything ever. Cho's behavior was starting to get creepier and creepier. Cho started writing lyrics from Collective Soul's Shine all over his dorm walls.
Give me a word, give me a sign.
also introduced himself to people as Question Mark, and sometimes Question Mark from Planet X. He also had a personal vendetta against his teachers and started bullying them by being a huge dick and showing up to class in really disruptive, weird outfits. In fact, one time he showed up to class wearing a Bedouin, which is essentially a lot like a turban. Now, I would have fucking loved to see this in real life, but unfortunately, there's no documentation showing him wearing a turban. I don't know why he thought that was a good idea or why he should do that, but he did. Another creepy thing he did is one time in a group project, I think it was a group writing project, Cho apparently wrote in protest to some of the students eating meat, and this is in quotations, there's a lot of grammatical errors, but he actually wrote it this way.
You low-life barbarians make me sick to the stomach that I want to barf over my new shoes. If you despicable human beings who are all disgraces to human race keep this up, before you know it, you will turn into cannibals, eating little babies, your friends. I hope you all burn in hell for mass murdering and eating all those little animals.
Cho's scary behavior actually made students stop showing up to class because everyone was scared of what act of bullying Cho was going to commence next. Now, I really don't know why he was such an asshole, but knowing that he was bullied in high school and had extremely low self-esteem, it makes sense that he might have thought that everyone was laughing at him secretly, so he acted like a huge dick to get revenge. He also wrote really disturbing shit as assignments. Now, here's the thing. I love gore, and I love violence in movies, games, comics, whatever the fuck I'm currently ingesting at the time. I like writing about those things as well. However, for me to enjoy that media, there has to be more substance than just violence. If it's a story, it has to be a good, immersive story. If it's a game, it has to have more game mechanics than just gore to get me to enjoy it. What I'm trying to say is, Cho's writings weren't tactfully disturbing or thought-provoking. They were just violent for the sake of being violent. Everything he wrote sounded like a violent fantasy. And considering how many verbal threats Cho made to people, it makes sense that people were genuinely concerned about their own well-being when even 10 feet near Cho. On top of this, many students reported that Cho would take photos of them without their permission. Not regular class photos either. Up close and personal photos of their legs, face, and all sorts of creepy shit. I'm sure the victims of Cho's surprise photography wouldn't have really cared had Cho not have been such a scary motherfucker. They were probably in fear that Cho was marking them as potential targets or something. I certainly would have thought that and would have reported him immediately. Cho also told his roommate that he had a fictional girlfriend named Jelly, and Jelly referred to Cho apparently as Spanky. Even Cho's roommate wasn't comfortable being near Cho.
I think he isolated himself so much that one day he just thought there was no way he could get rid of it, and the only way he could was from what he did.
I could definitely empathize. Could you imagine sharing a room where you sleep at night with this guy? His behavior in his dorm was pretty normal though, aside from the fact that he'd write song lyrics cryptically and obsessively all over his walls. He essentially just watched horror movies and listened to music, kept to himself mostly. I think this report is trying to insinuate that there's something wrong with heavy metal music and scary films and keeping to yourself, which in my opinion is total bullshit. The media you consume does not turn you into a violent murderer, obviously. And wanting to be alone means you just have an introverted personality. Doesn't mean you're out to shoot 40 people. I can assure you a 55-year-old woman wrote this report. Overall, if it wasn't clear by now, Cho was genuinely starting to lose his fucking marbles. And one day, he did something that genuinely made students fear for their lives around him. Remember that carpet knifing incident? Well, Cho actually went back to that same woman's room one night. That woman was 19-year-old Emily Hilscher. Cho went to her dorm's door and wrote lyrics from his favorite song cryptically all over it. That song was Surprise, Surprise. Collective Souls Shine. Now, if that wasn't creepy enough, know that Emily Hilscher was one of the first few victims to be brutally murdered in the Virginia Tech Massacre.